Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show.
He said he gon' huff and puff and blow my mind up. You meet the island girl, she might dirty wine up.
Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show. I'd like to thank J23 for the intro music. You can find a link to her music in the show description. My guest today is Marisa Moon. Did I pronounce that properly?
You did.
Awesome. Marisa is a national board certified health and wellness coach, master primal health coach. We share that in common, and intermittent fasting coach at marisamoon.com. Ranked as Google's #1 intermittent fasting coach since 2018. That's awesome. Maria just published her #1 new release on Amazon titled Not So Fast, the smarter, more gradual approach to intermittent fasting benefits that last. And we're going to be talking about her book. Welcome to the show, Marisa.
Yeah, it's great to be here. We've worked in the same field for a while, and
we've known each other for a bit. We've never really connected too closely, so I'm super excited to have this conversation with you too, and learn more about your new book. But before we get to that, I kind of teased that we have a lot of similar educational background as far as the health coaching side, but let's go back to the beginning. What did you do before? What got you even into wanting to be a health coach?
Well, it really not something I saw coming. I was a career bartender in the city of Chicago, and I always loved food, and I always loved taking care of my health. I just didn't realize that it could turn into a career. And it happened because initially I developed IBS. IBS stands for irritable bowel syndrome. And I was only like 28, 29 years old when that happened. And I was just determined to find answers because I knew that it must have something to do with what I'm eating. I just didn't know where to start. And I found a podcast. I was so lucky. Like back then, you guys, this was like freaking 12 years ago. And somehow I found this amazing podcast with these dietitians were talking about like your microbiome and food sensitivities and gluten sensitivities and dairy sensitivities. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't even know what the microbiome was back then. So these women opened up my mind to the possibility of me developing food sensitivities. I finally got the courage to give up gluten, which was totally I was so averted to that idea because I'm Italian. I love food. I consider myself a foodie. My family's like restaurateurs and chefs. And I was like, how the heck am I going to go through life without pasta and bread? Like, are you kidding me? A part of me will die. And I just decided I'm going to do it on the sneak. Nobody has to know. And I made a lot of my own food. I didn't eat out a lot. I was, very avid foodie, but I like to cook. So it was kind of easy to do. But the reason it became easy is because immediately my IBS symptoms went away. It was clearly a gluten intolerance that I had developed. And, that just propelled me towards this huge transition in my life. I found the paleo diet because of that podcast and the things I was learning. And the paleo diet made so much sense to me. I was like, why is there so much crap in our food? And why doesn't anybody care? Like, I always thought if it's in the food, it must be safe because the government officials have children too, and they have families and their families are eating it. But I was just so naive. And over time, I was like so into reading about primal and ancestral health. And I started a food blog for my gluten-free recipes. And I just slowly, gradually realized that there's a job called health coaching, and primal health coaching is the way that I found out. And I've never turned back. I've been certified for 7 years now, maybe more. I don't know, but it's
I'm just wondering, we might have been
tremendous life change.
We might have been in the same cohort. I can't remember now, but
anyway,
I want to share that you probably don't know this about me, but just about your backstory. My parents were restaurateurs as well, and that's what I did from junior high on. Started with waiting tables to then bussing tables to waiting tables to bartending. So we kind of have that similarity as well. So my question before we move on though, so you said you were a bartender, career bartender. What was your signature drink?
Oh, well, you know what? I worked at really high volume nightclubs in Chicago. So for a majority of my career bartending, I was like just about as fast as you can move people, 4 or 5 people deep. And that's because it was just so fun and quick, short shifts, make a lot of money and get in and get out. But when I did work at this amazing like coastal Latin restaurant at one point, we made incredible mojitos and caipirinhas, and we used crushed ice, like made it the really authentic way, put sugarcane sticks in it. And I'll never forget that, because it's like no matter how many times I try to replicate that, if I don't have the right ingredients to build it the way I built it there, it'll never be the same.
So
So
I know what a
turn
mojito is. What is that second one you said? I'm not
yeah,
familiar with that.
caipirinha.
What is that?
Caipirinha is made with Brazilian cachaça liquor. So cachaça is kind of like vodka, but it's like made from sugarcane. But
Okay.
instead of turning out like rum, it's turned into something that's more like pure and easy to mix, like vodka. And then it's with lime juice, and that's really it. It's just lime juice and cachaça. And I don't know if there's any club soda in it. It's been so long since I made one. But yeah, caipirinha is like a, low sugar, and well, the way I make them is low sugar. So it's like a mojito without the mint, and instead of rum, it's cachaça.
All right. Well, next time we get together in person, we'll toast over one of
Let's
those.
do
So
it.
so let's get back to sort of the book and or maybe before the book, like just your journey on your take on intermittent fasting, that sort of thing. So what is maybe one of the biggest mistakes, or maybe a handful of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when they try intermittent fasting for whatever the reason, whether it's weight loss or they just want to try something new, or IBS, like in your case, or what are some of the biggest mistakes you see?
Jumping in too fast. I mean, from the time that I started coaching intermittent fasting in 2018, I noticed everybody was like using all these hard and fast rules about what you can or can't do. And they were like trying to dive in headfirst and start fasting 16 or 18 hours. But something, Deepak, I know you understand, but a lot of people don't understand, is for so long we've been carbohydrate dependent and just living in this like eating 6 small meals a day and just eating around the clock, as just a societal or cultural thing living in the United States. And that's what we were advised to do. That's what we thought was healthy. But turns out having carbohydrates as the base of your entire dietary intake makes your body and your metabolism dependent on frequent refeedings. And so a lot of us are at the grips of our appetite. We have food on our mind all the time. And there's a lot of like metabolic destruction occurring because of that, just lifelong, for some people, or decades long dependence on carbohydrates. And so if somebody tries to like jump in intermittent fasting or just a strict diet that is so drastically different from that, it's really a shock to the system. And that's why people get things like they call keto flu, like they get headaches or they're really tired. Like you'll hear people say like, oh, you're going to be starving, but you just got to tough through it. Like, absolutely not. That is not how you start intermittent fasting. Fasting should always make you feel better or as good as you normally feel. That's a sign that you're doing it at the right pace for your current circumstances. And so I recognized, because I never did it the way with all these rules when I was doing it in my own life, I recognized that that was needed. People needed flexibility and they needed nuance and an understanding about like how to introduce your body to a reduced carbohydrate lifestyle, but not just jumping into keto. Like that, again, is too drastic. That's why people have constipation. That's why they have headaches. That's why they have setbacks and they want to quit, like right when they're getting started. But if instead you train your body, train your mind, train your lifestyle for carb reduction, eating more nutritious foods, while you're gradually introducing intermittent fasting, like we start with 12 hours in the method that I teach, because for some people that's already a change.
Yeah. I like to just get people, again, depend where they're coming from, obviously, right? But just like start with half an hour more, like just extend it, like delay your breakfast by
Exactly.
half an hour, and then it's an hour and whatever. I've shared this story before, but not with you, Marisa. I started fasting really into intermittent fasting because I personally like to work out fasted. So on the weekends, that made my first meal like a little bit later in the day because I'd get my strength training and everything in on the weekend. So I was already starting to put from that, like I need to eat by 7:30 in the morning type of thing, or earlier even, to like 11ish. And I mean, of course I'm hungry and obviously muscle glycogen's depleted, but I got into that, and then that just became sort of regular throughout the rest of the week, even when I wasn't doing a strength training session. And then I remember this a number of years ago, just really working on building my business up and all that sort of thing. And I'd gotten used to like, noonish before having breakfast type of thing. And I just got such in a flow with what I was working on. And then all of a sudden I was like, gosh, I am starving. What is going on? And I'm like, I should really eat. And I'm like, it's 4 o'clock already. Like I just went way past. And then I was like, huh, if I just go 2 more hours, that'll be a 24-hour fast, like without even
Wow.
trying. So I just did
Yeah.
it and it sucked. But I mean, that I wouldn't recommend that for people. That's how I got into it. I was like, hey, I can do 24 hours. I can do 22 hours if I need to. Like I don't do that
Mm-hmm.
regularly. I'm more of like again, depends on the day, 16 or 18 hours. But yeah, so I love what you do in your program. Just start with 12 and whatever the case may be. A question I hear all the time, and I know you're real really big on this, is the differences for fasting between men and women, and again, maybe where women are at in their stage of life. So could you address that a little bit?
Oh, yeah, that's huge. I mean, first of all, I will say that, of course, intermittent fasting works for women. That's why I'm a coach. I do intermittent fasting in my life because it's helped me tremendously. But there is very much so a difference between how the man's body and a woman's body responds. Just we're biologically different, plain and simple. And so a woman in her reproductive years has more like hypersensitive hormetic response. Hormetic or hormesis means that there's a beneficial response to stress, and fasting induces that type of stress. Exercise induces that type of stress. Cold plunging, infrared therapy. There's lots of things that introduce hormetic stress. When it's done properly for your circumstances, it causes beneficial adaptations. But for women, if they're abusing it at certain times during their cycle or while other hormonal imbalances are going on in their life, fasting can work against it. Their body can see it as a threat to their fertility and decide that I need to hold on to body fat because I need to make sure that I'm fit to grow a child. And so even if a woman doesn't care to have children or want to, it's going to have a huge impact because your hormones, your sex hormones are also part of your metabolic hormone. Like everything is tied together. And so when women want to see better results, I have to draw their attention to period tracking. First of all, if they are in their, perimenopausal years or standard like menstrual years, they have to pay attention to specifically the luteal phase, which is the 14 days before you get your period. But that tail end of the 7 to 10 days is when women, before you bleed, the 7 to 10 days before is like luteal part 2 or late luteal phase. And that's when we get the PMS symptoms, and women start to get like emotionally unstable, and they start to feel miserable and resent everything and everyone, and just hate the way they look, and just extremely overly critical of others and themselves and their surroundings. And that is a sign that your body is being pushed to do too much that it doesn't want to do and that you psychologically do not want to do. And so we need to free up we need to protect ourselves during that time. What works best, and we actually have scientific studies to prove this, you can change certain behaviors in your daily life during that phase to prevent PMS symptoms or to help your body handle the stress of fasting or exercise better. And that would include relieving yourself of some of the obligations, whether it's in your family, your job, or your personal life. We just book up our entire calendars like it's any other week of the month, but it's not any other week of the month. It is absolutely not. Your biology has a different plan. And so if you protect that time and give yourself a little more free time that week, take a few things off of your plate that week of the month, you're going to have fewer PMS symptoms. Your metabolism's going to fight back a lot less. And if you shorten that fasting window. So if you're normally fasting comfortably 16 hours on a regular basis, that week before you bleed is really good idea to go to 12 to 14 hours, because you will notice your cravings get worse. You're more irritable, you're more moody, you have lower energy, you want to check out if you're pushing too much at that time.
So you bring up an interesting thing. And first of all, I want to say, I love your approach. It's a little bit different than me. Obviously, I'm a man, and I kind of, with my clients were using fasting as a methodology for whatever their health goals are, I kind of just like them to like not go as long to begin with, as more of a, so I love your like more
For
nuanced
sure.
approach for sure. So I want to put that out. But my question to you is, in that phase, in that week, you just said, kind of like maybe go from the 16 to like a 12 or 14. What's your thoughts on maybe in that week, not necessarily reducing the time you're fasting, but maybe adding a little bit more calories, obviously nutrient dense calories. What's your take on
It's both.
that approach? Both.
It's
Okay.
both. Yeah. So my protocols or recommendations for women during that time ask them to ramp up nutrient density. And so, for women who are only fasting 12 to 14 hours, they can probably just keep doing that the week before their period and just increase the nutrient dense foods. And a lot of times that's going to include starchier foods that they may have already cut out, like lentils, for instance, and winter squashes. They can be really supportive and mineral rich during this time when a woman's body needs more of that. But if someone's fasting longer comfortably, and that's kind of their routine, it is important for them to cut back. First of all, they're probably not getting enough nutrients. I think that's part of the problem with everyone thinking they need to be so consistent. That's why one of these things I called fasting safeguards, they like prevent your body from getting alarmed from all of the changes that you're inducing. Fasting safeguards, one of them that I call a 3-meal day. So instead of a feast day, I call it a 3-meal day. And so it's really hard if you're always doing 1 meal a day, or you're always doing 16 or 18 hours fasting. It's really hard to get enough nutrients, enough protein, enough of the vitamins and minerals that your body needs, especially if this is a consistent lifestyle for you. So throwing in a 3-meal day, first of all, reassures your metabolism that it has everything that it needs and doesn't need to hold on to fat. But it also offers like this carb cycling or exchange of like fluids and nutrients inside your cells that like can help people achieve different breakthroughs if they're on a weight loss journey. And so for women and men, incorporating, strategically 3-meal days that are nutrient dense foods, though it's not a cheat day. It's not a feast day, like eat whatever the hell you want day. It's really like a mindful, how can I make today like an incredible day of eating that is nourishing my cells and making me happy too,
I love that, because I've never been a fan of like the whole nation of the cheat day. And again, it's like, what do you do?
Me
Like,
neither.
you're not going to cheat on your spouse or partner. Hopefully not. You're not going to cheat on your taxes. Like I hate the whole cheat thing in general. And of course, it depends
Yes.
what you eat. But I was kind of always like more sort of like maybe that. I mean, everyone, of course, depends on the situation. For me, I like to just backload my carbs and have a very consistent type of way I eat. And I know sometimes
Cool.
people, they want to have that refeed day. We hear that a lot. But I love that notion of like, it's like, instead of maybe it's just a 3-meal day instead of
Mhm.
like any other notion of like, I'm just going to go crazy on this one day and I'm going to eat the donuts or all the stuff that got me into trouble in the first place, probably, or whatever, right? Just like hopefully people have made that or starting to make those changes into their diet and lifestyle, of course. And it's like, hey, just have that extra thing. And maybe it's an extra bowl of berries or whatever the case may be, type of
Mhm.
thing. I love that. I love that notion of that. So yeah, thank you for
Thank
sharing that with
you.
the audience. So I unfortunately haven't had a chance to read your book yet, but tell us a little bit more about the book and like why you wanted to write it and what people are going to get when they pick it up.
Yeah, I think it was really timely in the industry for intermittent fasting content out there. We're starting to see some really important leading figures send similar messages that you'll see resonating in my book. But in the fasting community, there's been this just like heavy push for like, you don't have to worry about what you're eating, fast your way out of your diet, and you don't have to change anything else, just fast your way out of your problems. And there's also been this heavy emphasis on that you need to drink black coffee and water, and you can't have anything else during your fast. And that's simply not true. And so in Not So Fast, this book is showing people, first of all, it's based on my reset method, which is this proven method I've used so that anyone can safely, easily, and comfortably try intermittent fasting and turn it into a long-term lifestyle. Reset's an acronym, and each letter of reset stands for the phase that they're going to be introducing their body for these changes. So they reduce carbs at the R, reduce carbs, and eat nourishing foods, start with 12 hours, extend your fasts, and thoughtfully adapt. And so the
Love that.
first
That
three
makes sense.
phases,
Yeah.
yeah, and the first 3 phases, reduce carbs, eat nourishing foods, and start with 12 hours, are intentionally meeting you where you're at and gradually working towards what is optimal. You don't start with what is optimal or ideal because it's going to shock your body and it's going to make it more likely so that you're uncomfortable and you want to quit. And so when people are learning to gradually reduce their carbs and gradually introduce more variety into their diet and eat more protein, animal protein specifically, and incorporate, meals that look different when you don't have as many carbs. So they need to learn how to eat that way. Like, what do I fill my plate up with if it's not 3 cups of rice? What do I fill my plate up with if it's not wrapped in tortillas or 2 slices of bread? So it takes time. And as you're doing that, you're waiting until you're comfortable with 12 hours before you move on to 12 and a half or 13 hours. And I'm with you. I think half hour at a time makes a lot of sense because it's going to affect your schedule and your life. Like you have to decide
Right.
what you're going to eat and when you're going to eat. How's that going to work with the meetings you have scheduled today? How's it going to work with the time that you feed your kids? How's it going to work with the time you are allowed to take a lunch break? You need to think about these things. It's not just like a lot of us have some constraints, like maybe the food isn't even ready. You haven't thought about it. So one of the biggest mistakes people are making is they're just snacking their way through the eating window. I say that one of the biggest mistakes in the whole industry is calling it an eating window, because that makes it sound like you are eating through the whole freaking window. But that's not where the magic is at. The magic is
That's a
at the
good point. I'm
fasting.
glad you brought that up too. Yeah, because I sometimes too, and again, depends on the day and what the workload is, and if I did heavy strength training, or it was like, yeah, I have this window and I'll have typically just my 2 meals, my breakfast and essentially dinner in there. But sometimes there's some snack. Again, it just depends. But yes, I love it. We're not grazers. We're not cows. We're not supposed to
Exactly.
graze. You said earlier the 6 meals or the 6 small meals like we're grazing. Even in this whatever it's even if it's a 14. Excuse me, a 4 hour window. That doesn't mean you're eating for 4 hours straight. So I'm glad you brought that
No,
up.
exactly. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong if you occasionally do that, or if certain days you want to really like indulge a little bit more. I'm just saying that it is such a common mistake I see. It turns into under eating sometimes, strangely enough, because people are just snacking and picking. I'm on a diet. I'm on a diet. And so they're never eating an actual meal. They want to use fasting to get out of their responsibility to compose meals, to cook food, to shop for real ingredients, to build an actual meal. And so there's a lot that we're trying to, I guess, train you to start doing to care for your health better. Not so fast is not a shortcut. I'm telling you that you're probably when you're tired of the shortcuts, this is where you're going to find the answers, because we need to start treating your health like it's your hobby. We need you to start thinking about all of the things in your life that are helping or hindering your health, because you might be working really hard at something that is a losing battle until you wake up to all the other components that are playing a major role, like sleep and stress, in your ability to achieve the goals that you want for your health or to prevent disease and disorders. I mean, if you already have some conditions going on, if you already have, like your doctor has said, you have insulin resistance, or you have pre-diabetes, or if you have any heart conditions, cardiovascular, high blood pressure is just so extremely common. Everybody thinks it's normal. But guess what? That is a sign that your metabolism is not functioning properly. It's usually also a sign that you are not managing sleep or stress appropriately. And without those changes, it's very likely that you will continue to accumulate new diagnoses and more disorders and dysfunction that's only going to shorten your health span and lifespan in the long run. So Not So Fast is helping people see the bigger picture. This is about turning something that's good for your health into a long-term lifestyle that you actually enjoy and want to stick with naturally.
I didn't think we were going to go this way, but I'd love to get your take. And we could talk on this for, I'm sure, this topic for like 6 hours, and we'll continue into a couple minutes, I guess. I just recently came back from Florida. We did the theme park vacation with the kids. And one thing I noticed is, you go to one of these parks and there's like very few actual like where you can like have a real meal and sit down. Restaurants, it's all fast, grab a pizza. And even more so, if you look at the apps and you're like, where's all the places we can dine at this park? And there's like maybe not that, twice as many kiosks where you can grab your corn dog and your popcorn and whatever, more than there is actually like a restaurant where you can actually sit down. And I mean, obviously that's a microcosm of like, well, that's one specific place, but I think that's kind of like in general the food industry. Like, I'd love to get your take on that observation that I had.
You know what? There's some seriously disappointing aspects of the American food system that cannot be ignored. In my book, I talk about things like ultra processed foods and hyper palatable foods, and it's contributing. I'll explain a little bit more about that, but it's contributing to the development of food addiction. I'm a certified professional food addiction coach. I thought that was important for me to understand if I'm going to publish this book on fasting, because fasting attracts a lot of people who have history of disordered eating or who have disordered eating patterns like overeating, binge eating, and seriously, like a diagnosable condition we're hoping to see soon in the diagnostic manuals known as food addiction. And so it's not our fault. It's really just like a combination of multifactorial things that have gotten us to this point as a society and a culture. And ultra processed foods are essentially foods that are made, designed in a laboratory with ingredients that may or may not have originally existed in a real food, but now no longer represent the real food whatsoever. So it's like the components or building blocks of a real food, and then chemically or in a laboratory manipulated to optimize production cost, taste, texture, addiction, and profits. And so it's really dangerous, because now all of the stuff that's on the shelf, like let's say you're like, I'm going to reduce my carbs and I'm going to eat more keto. You're going to see 18 million keto products on the market now, and they're going to be advertised to you heavily. Facebook, Google, everything is going to know that you're interested in keto now. So all of a sudden you're going to start seeing all these ultra processed keto products. And a lot of those companies, I will say, initially have good intentions, but it's just a dog eat dog industry. And like, you cannot survive unless you are willing to take these shortcuts, or unless your clients or your customers are addicted to your foods and buying it very loyally. And so I will say that these foods, we have a lot of research on that, and I do share plenty of it in my book. But these foods are rewarding our brains to a new capacity. And so it's sort of like sending these, like I can't live without it signals to your brain cells. And you, depending on your personal history, your genetics, and the way that your relationship with food is, that can very easily turn into addictive eating patterns, because rewards in the brain are what drive all of our motivation and our ability to follow through and make decisions that are good for our health or going to self-sabotage. And so if we just kind of wake up to the fact that ultra processed foods and fast food, and one of the things I mentioned in my book too is like, why is it everywhere you go, like they're offering like free junk, or there's like a stand next to the checkout counter with all this junk? Like I go to get my car, an auto shop, I get work done on my car, and they have granola bars, chips, Cheetos, and cookies that I can take for free. You go to the bank, they've got lollipops that you can take for free. And the bowl is like right in my face. And if I'm checking out at like the gas station
sorry to interrupt. The orthodontist that my kids go to, they give like candy out, or like highly processed like granola bars or
oh
something.
my God, at
I
the
was like,
hospital.
this doesn't make
I'm waiting
sense.
for my husband. My husband gets a surgery done, and the waiting room is freaking cookies and protein bars that are all sugar and powdered milk creamer, which is trans fats and horrible for your health. I can't believe hospitals are going to have that junk in it. But anyways, that just is another sign. The example you gave, these examples we're talking about now, that really nobody's looking out for us. We're not set up to win. And so we need to take a more active role in ourselves being a healthy human. We can no longer look to others or look to the industry, the health industry, or our doctor, or, just the conveniences of life. We cannot depend on that to make choices for us. We need to start playing a more active role, which means it will take time. These are big changes that we're asking of you, but you find your trusted sources and you learn little by little, starting with the things that you do the most. So if you go to the gas station the most, and that's the place that you always get your, triple vanilla latte and your favorite chips, you might need to change the gas station, or you might need to not go inside anymore. You might need to bring your own iced coffee with you so that you don't feel like you have to go inside. There are changes that will need to occur, but you start with the things that are most frequent in your life and you work from there. You don't have to do it all at once. Nobody does.
Baby steps, for sure. So Marisa, before we kind of come to a sort of wrap it up here, I do want to ask one sort of last main question here. So obviously, the book's about intermittent fasting and that sort of thing. What's your take on, like, I kind of mentioned earlier, kind of by accident, I started with a 24-hour fast. or what do so what do you think about that? Or like, a lot of people, some of the bigger names in sort of, let's call it the general industry, like do a quarterly, 3-day fast, or, once a year, a 7-day fast. Like what's your take on some of these other longer fasts, less frequently, but like longer fasts?
Yeah, I think just to start, a lot of people are attracted to longer fasts because for two reasons. Number one, they hear about autophagy. Autophagy is your body's like recycling process. So it takes junky old cells and separates the components that can be reused and recycled into newer, healthier cells, or to revitalize current cells. And so autophagy is very appealing, especially because everybody talks about it like it's the greatest thing ever, but it's in its infantile like stage in research. They're every time they test something about autophagy, they realize they don't know 100 other things about it. And so I think it's a little bit premature for people to be so excited about using autophagy, because like autophagy, for instance, can be exploited by certain viruses. I've suffered from cold sores since I was a young girl, and that particular virus, it's one of the herpes viruses, actually cold sores. That one can exploit autophagy when it's in the final stage, and the cell is most vulnerable because autophagy is trying to break that cell down to its parts. That's when it's infiltrated by the virus, and you'll get
Interesting.
another
I've never heard of
outbreak.
that before. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
And it can happen with certain tumors and certain cancers, but it can also be the opposite. Certain cancers and certain tumors can respond favorably to autophagy, and it can help people, thrive through something like radiation treatment. But it's different in every situation, and there's so many variables we don't know yet. So I will say that I'm cautious about encouraging fasts longer than 3 to 5 days. 3 to 5 days is a nice sweet spot to tap into some stem cell production. We start to see autophagy really peak around day 3, but that's when we are going to start seeing stem cell production. And so that can be really incredible for certain people and certain therapeutic settings. But other than that, I think the other reason people are attracted to it is because there's a lot of fasting books out there. Even some of my favorite, like Dr. Fung's fasting books. He's a trailblazer in the world of fasting, but he's also a renal doctor. He helps people with kidney disease, like whose kidneys are failing, who are literally near their deathbed between the morbid obesity and type 2 diabetes and kidney failure. And he's a clinician. He doesn't have time to work with people on all of these other changes. So they're fasting their way into ketosis. It might take them 3 days to achieve ketosis. So they have to do 3-day fasts. But instead, if they would work on reducing their carbs and gradually, increasing their fasts, they can accomplish the same thing with less discomfort and less willpower required. So there are, applications for that. I will say, for someone like you and I, if we're not doing it for fat loss or for like a specific, targeted reason, it might be just because you want to see what you're capable of. It might be because you're like, I want to make sure my body's able to focus all of its attention on other things besides digesting food. I did a 5-day Prolon fasting mimicking diet. So it's a 5-day fast that includes food that's been scientifically validated to not turn off those fasting pathways and not turn off ketosis. And so I thought it was actually too much food for me, to be honest, but that's because I'm already adapted to fasting.
Sure.
I think, like, for somebody who doesn't fast at all, it will feel very restricted. I actually wondered how a man that's way bigger than me would even think that's enough food. But it's a fascinating thing to consider if you find fasting unappealing, or you want to do a longer fast. That can be a tremendous way to achieve that. But I also think there needs to be caution in population over 60, or people who haven't been consuming enough protein, or people who do too much endurance training, or women in their reproductive years. Any fast longer than 3 days, your body is probably not going to have the building blocks it needs to thrive in that condition. And so it's over abused, I think, especially populations over 60 years old. Autophagy becomes more and more of a stressor on your body because you don't have the building blocks to supply your cells to rejuvenate.
Absolutely, especially as autophagy has also been promoted as like anti-aging and that sort of thing as well, which of course some of those populations are like looking for. I won't get into it here because I mean I've already documented on my blog post and everything like that. But I did 2.5 years ago now. I did a 4-day fast. Again, my purpose was, let's see what I'm capable of. The family was away. I was by myself. If there's a time to do it, it's going to be now, and I don't have all the the kids wanting this and that and the other thing. And yeah, it was very interesting how the changes, like day one, no problem, even day two, like no problem. Then to day three, you got a little more challenging. And then and I was still doing my strength training and like regular routine, and
Wow.
how noticeable it was. So anyway,
Oh
I'm
my
not gonna, I'm
God.
not gonna
When I did a
get,
40,
I'm not
40
getting
hour
into details.
fast, I couldn't even like lift 10-pound dumbbells over my head. I was like 42 hours into my fast and I was like, this is crazy. Like I can't
recovery was
lift these
tough.
10-pound
Recovery was really
dumbbells. I'm
tough. Yeah.
like,
Anyway,
this is nuts.
it's on my blog post on my website, everyone. So obviously, Marissa, as this is, we're talking a health topic here. This podcast is not solely about health, but I do always like to ask my guests, what is outside of intermittent fasting, what's your morning routine, or what like healthy habits? Like what does that look like for you?
I have started doing something I'm calling my inner self advantage. So it's this 5 to 30 minutes of focus on my inner self, things about what makes me who I am and what best brings out my strengths and improves my struggles with my shadow self. I don't know if you ever heard that term before, but it's kind of like when our strengths turn into our weaknesses or when we turn against ourselves. I have a history of depression and I struggle with certain aspects of motivation because I have ADHD. And I have found that by focusing on my inner self, and this is in a very like directional, like intentional way. I have books that I love, like The Alter Ego Effect, human design books. There's this new book called Gene Keys that I just started looking into. So these are like personality typing or persona developing systems that have been proven to help people bring out the best of themselves and help provide you with some direction when you feel a sort of apathy towards life or your responsibilities. And so that's why I call it the inner self advantage, because it reminds me like I am so much more than these tasks that I have on my list or this struggle that I am currently facing within myself. And instead of thinking about what I want to achieve in my business or why I'm doing what I'm doing in my business, I like to think about why I'm here on this planet and what makes me show up as my best. And so, for what it's worth, anybody looking to reveal some of the best parts of yourself, I absolutely recommend The Alter Ego Effect and Human Design.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. One last question here. If you could go back and tell your younger self, like what is one thing you would tell them, or something you wish you would have started earlier, what would you tell your younger self?
Wasn't expecting this. I don't know. I'm not really like someone who has a lot of regret or thinks that much about it. I think maybe I started too early with like experimenting with alcohol and marijuana. And I always wonder if like that made my ADHD worse or, how much of an impact it really had on the development of my brain. Because if you're only 14 years old and you're doing these things, it's got to have some sort of impact, negative impact on building new neural connections. And your brain's not fully developed until you're in your late 20s. And so I do wonder sometimes like if I should have been a little bit more cautious about that. So I might tell my younger self to protect my brain, and that is the most important thing that I have.
Oh, I love that answer. Love that answer.
Thank you.
Now, Marisa, you also have a gift for the audience. Do you want to briefly explain what that is? And I'll just say for everyone, we're going to have the link for this gift and all of Marisa's social media handles and her website and all that will all be part of the show
Cool.
notes.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, the book, Not So Fast, you guys, is based on the reset method that I introduced to you in our conversation today. And the reset manual is a 26-page guide about the reset method. So it's free to download and you can get it at marisamoon.com/IF freedom. The IF stands for intermittent fasting. And at the top, you'll see, you just enter your email and I'm going to send you the reset manual. And for some people, that's all they need. They don't even need more. But a lot of people need a lot more, and that's how it turned into a book. So I'm happy to share that with you, and I hope to hear from you if you like the book. If you do read it, please do leave me a review on Amazon. It helps me reach more people.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't have the copy of the book yet, but I will be getting it because I love reading all sorts of various topics, and certainly, things in the health related field as well. Before we leave, Marisa, what is, like, if there's like one just short little golden nugget or words of wisdom you could leave for the audience, what would that be?
Sleep is the most essential component of you feeling good in your life and really thriving. You can't fast your way out of poor sleep. You can't perform at work even a fraction of the ability that you're capable of without good sleep. And you won't know if you're getting good sleep or not unless you're tracking it. So use a sleep tracker and aim for over 1 hour of deep sleep per night.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that advice, and I wholeheartedly agree with that as well. Marisa, thank you for being a guest on the Deepak Saini Show. Really appreciate you being on today.
Yeah, it's been great. We should do it another time in the future. And I'll send you a
Absolutely.
book for sure.
Oh, absolutely. That'd be awesome. So I'm going to throw it back to J23, who's going to play us out with some music here. Thanks, everyone, for listening to the Deepak Saini Show. Remember, exceptional results for the exceptional you. This episode is brought to you by Bioptimizer's Mass Zymes. This is digestive enzymes that helps you break down your protein, fats, starches, and sugars. I've been using this product for, over a year now, specifically in a protein-heavy meal, because I really want to break down my protein to make sure I get the amino acids that I need for maintaining muscle growth, maintaining lean muscle mass. Super important as we age and all stages of life, really. So again, huge proponent of Mass Zymes. Check out the link below to see how you can get at least 10% off, if not more. Cheers.
Podcast produced by the Minted Green Company,